Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset.
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is the Broken Meeple, a show where I devote my time to raving and ranting about board games, but usually more the latter one if we're truly honest. Today we have Ayar. This is the third in a trilogy of games, supposedly. Yeah, trilogy is kind of a weak word to call it. I mean, it's not like the Back to the Future trilogy where it all links together. This one is basically just, look, they're in sort of the same setting, the same style of game, and the same graphic design. This is from Osprey Games, and basically they started off with Merv, which I was cool with. I mean, a 7 out of 10, maybe a 6 out of 10 now. It was fine. Yeah, did the job. It was slightly different from other Euros. You know, very dry. But I don't know, that was okay. I thought, yeah, you know what, I could play this one again. Although, let's face it, do you see anybody else play it anymore? Then the second one came out, Sancor. That's one I really bounced off. I mean, that one really did not suit me. It was overly long for what it was. It was, again, bone dry. It was just another one of those, like, you know, mini games for the sake of mini games, which, you know, there's been a few of those lately. But I really hated the scoring system in that one. The whole idea that you had these books that you had to collect, and the scoring was entirely based off which books were collected during a game, which meant that you could spend ages on a particular mini game since the start of the game and find out at the end that it was all for nothing because those colour books just didn't turn up, you know, because other people decided to do other things. You know, Sancor just did not work. And honestly, do you ever see anyone playing that at the moment? I mean, honestly, I don't really see a lot of people playing these games. Well, we now have Ayar, so illustrated Ian O'Toole, so it's got pretty good graphic design throughout. Fabio Lopiano as one of the designers, you know, co-designed with Mandela Fernandez Grandon, I hope I pronounced that right. But this is the third one. So they're not related in terms of mechanics, it's more the settings. It's apparently a simpler one than the other two. This is meant to be easier to get into rules-wise, and is meant to bring something a little bit different to the table from what I've heard. That is, on top of the whole mini-games for mini-games thing. Yes, this is definitely one of those types of Euros, but there's supposedly a little bit of a twist in here. Is that twisting going to be enough?
What am I, psychic?
Ayar takes place over 4 rounds, where these 4 characters here are going to be moving along these 4 tracks. These 4 tracks consist of numbered spaces to represent their movement, but also the different types of actions, of which there are 4, that each player can perform. On your board, you have a grid made up of these little tiny little houses. I'm not going to put them all on right now. And you have these little head markers yourself, one in each of the colours to correspond to these, as well as a gold one as a wild, basically. Choose your own. You will take it in turns to place one of your markers on a row or column on your board. This will dictate 2 things. Firstly, how far that respective colour marker character moves along their track. So let's say I put it on this one here. It's got 2 arrows, therefore the purple moves 2 spaces. It also means that I have to take a house off this grid, place it on one of the action spaces before the character that has just moved, so you are restricted in which ones you can do. Let's say I pick this one to do the pottery action, for example. And the strength of the action is dictated by the number of power icons that you see in the row or column that you left behind. So in this case, I got power 3, for example. This enables me to do the pottery action at strength 3, which is effectively one of the 4 mini games that you do. As you perform these little mini-games, these characters will move around the board, but at the end of a round, one of them retires. The 1/3 is the back. This one triggers a little bit of interim scoring, but then in subsequent rounds, you are left with 1 fewer character roaming around the board. So you'll have yourself a few actions in the first round, but then you're going to have less actions in the next round and less actions in the next because there's less characters going around, because you will lose one of your little head markers in each round as that takes place. The premise of the game is that you are trying to score victory points, but it's a little bit different. Here you need to score sun and moon points, because your score at the end of the game is the lower of the 2. You'll score sun points by performing the 4 mini-games, and by the 4 mini-games you will uncover little sun icons, and the more of those you have when you score for that particular game, you will score that many sun icons recorded on a dial here. These are scored at the end of a round, so these will compound if you get them down early. On top of that, by doing your other mini-games well, you will uncover moon points. At the end of a round, these will score in the night phase, and you will score moon points accordingly. And of course, you're trying to keep these in some kind of balance as they go around the table, because at the end of the day, the lower of the 2, typically the sun one, will be your score at the end of the game. The minigames themselves are kind of standard Euro fare. You will essentially be sailing a little boat across this map here in order to build buildings. You'll place maize, corn, whatever from farming down here, and the most cubes basically gets a little bonus at the end. You will be collecting these pottery tiles, of which you're trying to collect most of the same color, and you will also be collecting these little weaving patterns here in order to sort of place them in a Tetris-like formation in your grid on your board, put the most suns together because they're split up in half, and of course gain sun points that way. So it basically carries on for those 4 rounds. As you take more of these buildings off, your actions get stronger. You'll uncover more bonuses. You'll be able to earn llama tiles, which basically allow you to muck around with your score at the end. There are little, I'm just going to call them mask tokens because I can't really pronounce the name that they actually are. These will enable you to unlock special bonuses and abilities on your board. But the whole premise is the timing aspect of these 4 characters moving along the board, because you know sort of which one's likely to get retired. You might go out of your way to move them further so that they don't retire, and as these go around the tracks, they will trigger these little interim scoring tiles which score the sun icons for the respective mini game that's pictured on them. So if one of, let's say, the purple character is going to trigger pottery and farming, and that's the 2 I've been focusing on this game, I'm going to want that character to stick around longer than another who's, say, focusing on the other mini games that I haven't really touched upon. You play after these 4 rounds, find out how many sun and moon points each player has got, check out the lower of the 2 scores, and whoever has the highest at that point is the winner.
Of course!
So first I want to touch upon the production quality of this game. It's a little hit and miss. I like the graphic design. It's Ian O'Toole doing the graphic design, which means things are pretty clear, the actions are clearly defined, the stuff on your board makes sense, some of the graphic design is relatively intuitive. There's 1 or 2 that are a little bit weird, but it doesn't take long to just check it in the book, and once you know it really. So it's relatively easy to get into, and I gotta say, the rules for this game are a lot more simpler than probably my overview made them out to be. The rulebook itself is not particularly big in terms of how much text there is, but there's a lot of pictorial examples. Most of the book is, here's your introduction, here's your game setup components, here's the setup of the board, which surprisingly actually doesn't take that long to set up either, but there's not that many rules for the actual playing of the game, and there's a lot of examples. So this is a very easy one to get into compared to Merv and Sancor by a country mile. Here, easily this is like the, I'm not saying that this is the most basic of the 3 in terms of its depth. There is some depth here, but in terms of rules complexity, definitely the easier of the 3 to get into. Definitely miles easier than Sancor was. But the artwork is a bit on the dull side. I mean, it's very dark, muted colors everywhere. I mean, you can barely make out at a distance how this board looks. Yes, you're only really focused on the tracks, but there's nothing to look at other than those tracks because everything else just looks really dull. I don't like this art style. This art style on the cover makes it look like it's going to be a big sort of colourful affair, and it's called Children of the Sun, and then you look at this and it's like, ugh, I don't know, I just don't like it. It's dark, it's muted, and it doesn't pop on the table. People don't sort of, come around and go, ooh, that looks interesting. No, they just walk on straight past. It doesn't have the presence to make itself stand out. But, it's easier to get into, and at least it's clear to understand. So, in terms of functionality, it top marks, fair enough. It just may not be a looker on the table. Everything else is produced fine. It's cardboard tokens and some screen printed meeples. The dials are pretty good. They're nice and sturdy to track your sun points. I haven't had a problem with these. So yeah, generally production quality is fine, although it is demanding quite a high price tag for what you get in the box, I must admit. For a few dials, cardboard components, and some meeples, I would have expected this to retail a bit lower than, say, the £55 mark that I'm seeing some retailers do it for. Somewhere between, I would say, like 40 should be how much as this price is. Any higher, then it's a bit expensive, but I don't know. I don't think these games have been terribly well priced in the past, so this one is no exception. So, the gameplay itself, you're talking about 4 mini-games, and we've had a lot of these lately. I mean, we're crying out loud. I've done Baghdad recently, which was essentially 4 mini-games. Ada's Dream, as much as I love that game, is effectively 4 mini-games and, and the main premise. So, it's all about how do these mini-games kind of key off each other, and are these separate mini-games actually fun to do? Well, Ayar is basically bouncing everything. It's not bouncing, that's the wrong word. It's putting everything into this track movement, because this is kind of the core of the game. Balancing out these 4 characters, although, my god, I know you're wondering why am I calling them characters. The theme of this game is probably one of the most batshit themes I have ever seen for a Eurogame. These Eurogames are dry as hell. We know the theme means nothing at the end of the day. But my god, when you try to explain this game to people, if you try to actually reference the theme, people think you're on drugs. I mean, I'm just going to say it like really fast. Let me just read the in the beginning bit here or something, right? And if I mispronounce these names, I make no apologies. I'm sorry. I mean, for crying out loud. Alright, so what have we got here?
Viracocha created Inti, the sun god, and Mama Quilla, the moon god. They rose from Lake Titicaca as one, husband and wife, sister and brother. But Inti looked on jealously as the brilliance of Mama Quilla and threw ash on her so that she would not shine brighter than him. Okay? Together they bore 4 sons and daughters, the Ayar pairs, who would emerge from Tawantinsuyu, south of the Great Lake with the 10 lesser clans of the first people. The Ayar would be tasked with finding fertile ground at the center of the universe to found the empire of Tawantinsuyu, while teaching the clans the skills necessary to start a civilization.
What the hell are you talking about?
That's not even all of it. I mean, I get that this is obviously boiled down in some kind of history of religion and that. I am not an expert on this kind of stuff at all. I make no qualms about that, but my god, for a game that is going to be dry as hell, this is one of the weirdest themes I've seen to use, and when you try to explain it to people, I honestly do feel like I'm like going mad when I do or something. So I just call these characters, I call these masks, their actual name is like hard to pronounce as well. It's like, I feel like maybe this game could have just stuck with an easier theme and it would have done fine. But yeah, that's more just a funny little gripe I have. But the actual core gameplay, so these 4 tracks, this is the best part of the game. You know, the idea that you're moving these guys around these 4 tracks and trying to time it with the opponents. There's actually a reasonable amount of interaction here. Not like, oh, I directly screw you over. Really, the only bit of interaction in this game is the fact that when you put the cubes out on the farming, whoever gets the most out in a round gets a little bonus. That's kind of it. The rest of it is just, oh, you took the thing I fancied. But you are definitely keen to know what the opponents are likely to do with these 4 god characters, because they are basically moving around the tracks at different rates. Everybody is influencing their movement, and you can tell from what others are doing whether they're going to favor a particular one or not. You also know which of these they've got left. Have they used their wild yet, or have they only got certain colours left? So you know which ones they're going to move. How far are they likely to move? In a 4-player game, they can only move 1 or 2 spaces. 3 if you've got a 2-player game going, or solo. So they're not going to move at like excessively fast rates. So you are definitely interested in the other players, what they're doing, and everybody has an influence on the game state, because it only takes one bad move or one mistiming or something for one of these things to retire before you wanted it to, and now you've got to adapt your situation. It certainly makes it a lot more, more interesting than some of the other, like the other 2 games that came before it, which I felt were much more of a solitaire nature, aside from that book scoring in Zancor, but then I hated that book scoring, so that didn't really help. But, this one does set aside itself from some of the other crowd by giving you a mechanic that actually means, okay, this is not a solitaire game. And if anything, it also means you want to play this at high player counts, because if you play this at lower player counts, yes, you can move them faster at a time, but I don't know, I feel like with 4 players you get most of the benefits of this game, because yes, more stuff's going to happen before your turn, but they don't move at such a high rate at a time, and everybody's got, everyone's going to be sharing the 4 minigames. You can't, I mean, you're not likely to get a situation where one person focuses on one minigame and that's it, because you will finish it before the game ends and then you'll have nothing to do. So people are going to overlap at some respect, and you might even sort of semi-team up with another player to go, well, I reckon you want that one to move, so I'm going to move it just a little bit further. Come on, just make sure it doesn't retire. And it's like, hopefully you're on the same wavelength. And it's just, that is something a bit more interesting. Sadly, though, that doesn't repeat when you get into the actual mini-games. I mean, Baghdad, that I mentioned before, and Ader's Dream. Ader's Dream's mini-games are a bit more interesting. Not to mention, there's a lot more bonus chaining you can do, and they all sort of flow into each other quite nicely. With Baghdad, the mini-games in that one aren't necessarily the most interesting, but again, they kind of link to each other, because you want to do well at one thing in order to score highly at another thing and that sort of thing. But this one, the mini games just feel completely separate. The only thing relevant on each mini game is how many suns you score and how many moons you score. That is it. They don't interlink in any way, shape or form. It's just a case of, can I actually do the action on this track, and where's the scoring tile when the god character passes by it? That's it. The minigames are just their own separate thing, and they're all kind of boring. I mean, the ship one, you've got this whole board here, and all it is that you move a marker on this track, and when you get to the building spot, you stick a little marker down, and it reveals sun or moon. That's it. You might get a token every now and again off a lake. That's all that is, all right? But it gets worse, okay? The farming one I mentioned, you have these cubes on the top of your board, and if you remove the cubes, they reveal sun and moon like everything else. So what you do with these cubes, basically, on this board here, on the bottom it's got tracks, you strength free action, I take 3 cubes, and I put them on this board.
Is that it?
Yeah, that is all you do. It's just put cubes on this board. That's all the action is. You know, the weaving, you get these little tiles, they come in 4 different ones, and believe me, you're going to want to keep everything in this insert, because if you try to take stuff out of this insert and set the game up as the book tells you to, you are playing a dexterity game just to keep the stacks balanced. But, you know, you put them on this board in whichever sort of Tetris form you like, and you try to plug up the suns and fill up columns. That's probably the most interesting minigame out of the 4, and even then, that's it. And then the pottery, you can buy these coloured pots, and you try to get some of the same colour for more points. The mini games in this are just boring. They're not interesting at all. And, you know, saying, oh, this game I'm going to try pottery, this time I'm going to try, you know, farming. It really isn't much of a switch. I mean, once you've played this game once, you've got exactly what everything in this game is about, and it's not going to have any replay value whatsoever to suddenly change from one type of mini game to the next. The only thing that will slightly affect your play is which of these bonuses you unlock with the masks, and even then, 4 of them just make the individual actions stronger, so only these 5, one of them is just get a llama, that's not a big deal, and that leaves 4, and they're not exactly strategies in themselves, they're just cool little bonuses. So really, everything in this game is banking on the movement of these gods. And that premise, that mechanic, which granted is the best part of the game. It is fun to do that aspect. But once you're past that aspect, you're not left with anything much more than a bare bones set of the most basic of basic Euro mechanics. You know, when you take buildings off this grid, when you take them off in a quadrant, you put a little temple on the board and it will score nighttime points for you later. That's it. I mean, you're basically just choosing 1 or 2 of the, you know, like different activities to focus on, and you're hoping that they'll score lots, either in the early game or the late game, and that's kind of the deal. In the late game, you want to score for 1 or 2 activities, and in the early game, you want to maybe do 1 other activity just to capitalize on its early game premise, and then leave it alone. That's kind of the strategy for the whole game, every game. It's not really any different. And the whole sun and moon thing, I like the mechanics where you have like the lower of 2 scores is what you score for. That I'm cool with. But the problem with this one is that you always, and I mean always, no one has changed this in any of the games I've played. In no case does sun beat moon. You just get far too many moon points in this game for the whole lower of the 2 to be of any relevance whatsoever. Your moon points are going to eclipse your sun points any day of the week. There is no way you're going to make it overtake. Maybe there's one weird way to play where you could potentially do that, but I don't see what it is, apart from maybe this bottom bonus here where you score sun points for things you've unlocked, but that's it. Your moon points are easily going to be more than your sun. So really, your final score is entirely your sun. You might as well just cut the moon out of the game. You know, there's no point where the moon doesn't move further past the sun, in which case, I gained too many sun points, I should have focused on the moon. Because no, as you play through the game, you're going to unlock more moon points just generally by doing the games. So you unlock them at sort of the same rate, but the moon points you gain are higher than the points you gain for the sun, even though they compound from round to round. If any of you out there who have played this game have had a situation where their sun have beat the sun points, beat the moon, then by all means stick it in the comments and tell us how you did it, because it is not a common thing. And if you're going to have a whole lower of the 2 scores mechanic, you need to make it actually meaningful to have that mechanic. Otherwise, what was the friggin' point?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
You can play this solo. The solo rules are fine. They're relatively easy to understand. But the problem with playing this solo is that you lose that interaction with having a lot of players muck around with these tracks. A 2-player game is not the way to play this. I don't think it's anywhere near as fun as playing it on 4. And solo is basically like playing it with 2, except you have an AI that basically just doesn't care about anything and just cheats its way to its points value. But that being said, it's an easy AI to pilot, doesn't require too much in the way of extra rules. You just flip a board over, and as it does activities, it just basically moves along tracks and scores accordingly. Pretty straightforward, and it does give you an opportunity to play it solo, but really it's a weaker game than playing it with 3 or 4. I think you need a minimum of 3 players to play this, and ideally, I don't say this often, you want a full count of 4. That's exactly the way it should be played, I think. But once you've played it once, you've seen everything. There just isn't enough replay value or enough in the games, the mini games themselves, to draw you back. It's entirely this god character movement, and once you're done with that, you're kind of done with the game. There's just not enough to bring you back for further plays. So overall, Ayar is fine. It's a fine game. I'm not saying I dislike it. I just think it's kind of given me some enjoyment up front, but it's not going to continue to give me enough enjoyment. There's, you know, I have played it enough for review, and now I feel like I'm done. If I get to play it again, fine. Once in a blue moon, maybe. But I've got no intention to hang on to it and show it to loads of other people, because every game's just going to kind of feel the same. And it doesn't really matter if you get different people playing it. The mini games are the same. The way these characters move is kind of the same. There's just not enough variation to make it fresh each time. It's something that will keep you going. You'll play it a few times and go, that was quite cool. And then you'll never play it again. That's just the way this is. For me, Ayar is an average 5 out of 10. It's an okay game. It's an okay game. I will play it. But the replay value is just like non-existent for a big Euro. It costs a lot of money to buy as well. You know, it's expensive for the few plays you're going to get. It's a muted art style. The minigames just aren't fun in themselves. Really, the main reason this thing gets 5 points is because the graphic design and the ease of play is definitely up there. And also, this god character movement is the fun part of the game. But once you're done with that, you're not left with much else. The minigames are just too basic, too boring. The theme means nothing. There's not enough to bring me back for more. And I was close to giving this a 6 out of 10. But I just can't see it. So with all these 3 games, Merv is definitely, I think, the best one of the 3. This one would easily be my second best. Sankor, really didn't like that one. That one is a 4, if not a 3 out of 10 for me. I really did not like Sankor. You know, Sankor just was too overwrought, and that scoring system needs to go to hell, frankly. I hated that scoring system. So, you know, I know some people love it, but let's face it, do you ever see it being played? Yeah, what do you think? So, yeah, it's fine for a few games. I recommend people give it a shot. I recommend you try it once or twice. But once you've played it once or twice, I think you'll be kind of done and you'll have moved on.
Your mother.
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Bit long for a speed review, I'll admit, but there was a bit more to talk about than I thought, but not enough to make it a full detailed review. But hey, I never get my timings right, so what do you know? But don't forget to check out the rest of my video content. There's been plenty of Essen releases and plenty more to come. You can also leave your comments down below. What do you think of the game? Do you think I'm wrong about the replay value problem? Do you actually enjoy these little mini games? Why? I don't know, but, you know, do you actually really find them great? By all means, let you know in the comments. We want to get everybody's perspective here. So until next time, regardless of whether you need to check out the history books in order to learn 1 iota of this game's theme, it's still only a game. So bye for now.